For the past 20 years, our family has spent considerable time at a family camp in the Boundary Waters Wilderness area in northern Minnesota. One year, as a fundraiser, the camp auctioned off an evening with a local expert on the area's wolf packs. We bid to win, and we got it. With young kids in tow, we drove from camp to the end of a lonely road, parked our car, and waited, as instructed, in the complete and utter darkness. In that part of the world, there's no cell service, or cars, or street lights, or people. Just a black, thick veil of night, punctuated only by the sounds of frogs and insects and the occasional barred owl. After a while, a pickup truck approached and out-jumped the strangest-looking man we had ever seen. It was Jim Schwartz, a modern-day John the Baptist of sorts, all decked out in his dirty lumberjack shirt and mud-clad boots. He had worked for the International Wolf Center in town for over 25 years, tracking and tagging all of the area packs. Without saying hello, he opened up the van's sliding door and jumped in. Now, I'm not promising anything, he started. Finding wolves in the woods is like needle in a haystack. It's like a needle in a haystack. Just be quiet, do what I tell you. The kids cowered in the back seat. He was terrifying. Off we drove, Jim pointing the way deeper and deeper into the woods. The roads narrowed, first pavement, then gravel, then two-track, guided only by our headlights, which, even on bright, felt like a flickering candle against the vast expanse of blackness. Eventually, Jim told us to stop the car, and he lined us up against the van with our backs to the van. Standing in the darkness, he taught the four of us how to howl like a wolf pack. So the kids, he taught to howl like pups that go, wah, wah, wah. I howled like the juvenile, yip, yip. And my husband Michael and Jim howled like the leaders of the pack, or the dominants, which is basically a siren with an upswing. Right? Then, like a symphony conductor, Jim raised his arms and signaled for us to start howling, which we did for a good 2 minutes, as loud as we possibly could, and then he dropped his arms and we were silent. As we tilted our heads and strained our ears, we heard nothing. And so it went for nearly 2 hours. We'd go through the whole process and strain our ears into the abyss, and there was nothing. By 1 a.m., the kids were fast asleep. We felt both dejected and completely sick of the nut in the passenger seat. We turned back toward camp and came upon a particular bend in the road where the trees had grown over the road and had met in the middle, making a kind of like tree tunnel in this part of the road. So as we were going around the bend in the middle of this flowery tunnel, this leafy tunnel, a wolf pup sprang out from the woods and crossed in front of our car. "Stop the car!" Jim yelled. We piled out, got the signal, and howled. There was a fleeting silence, and then a wolf pack. Pups, juveniles, one dominant, howled back at such close range that we could hear each individual voice spread out in the brush along the road, on the other side of the road. Back and forth we volleyed. We howled, then silence, then the wolves. Until Jim, who could tell the dominant was getting stressed out, because remember, one of the pups, we were between the pack and one of the pups that had crossed the road. He felt that the dominant was getting kind of too stressed out, so he told us to get back in the van. It was one of the most exhilarating moments of my entire life. Something significant shifted inside. The danger and the fear and the anxiety I'd always associated with the dark and the unknown and the wild became something else, a face-to-face experience of the living God. Later, it was quiet in the van on the hour-long drive back to camp. And after we got home and I tucked my son into bed, he took my cheeks in his dimpled little hands and said, "Mom, that was the chance of a lifetime." It's a funny thing, darkness. Christianity has very few nice things to say about it. From earliest times, the church has equated darkness with sin and ignorance, spiritual blindness, death. Deliver us, O Lord, from the powers of darkness, we pray. The synonym comes directly from the Bible, which includes almost 100 references to darkness. In most, the verdict is unanimous. Darkness is bad news. So many of the Hebrew scriptures, light stands for life and darkness for death. When God is angry with the people, they're plunged into darkness. Locusts darken the land. People grope in the darkness. And yet, even in our scriptural tradition, that is not the whole story about darkness. So many important things in the Bible happen in the dark. Jacob wrestles the angel. Joseph dreams his dreams. God parts the Red Sea. Manna falls from the heaven in the wilderness. We know the story about Abraham, about how he is full of doubt as to whether God follows through on promises, if he and his wife Sarah will ever have children. Abraham rails at God, who, instead of arguing, tells the old man to go outside and look up into the dark sky. Count the stars if you are able, God tells Abraham, for so shall your descendants be. It's a lesson and a promise that could have happened, perhaps, in the heat of the day. But the close darkness of night is the key element in Abraham's decision to trust God. In such stories, these images, thick darkness reveals a particular access to divine presence. We see darkness work its magic again in this morning's gospel from Mark. Jesus has been working miracles on the Sea of Galilee's northern shore. He moves from one place of suffering to the next, tending to the people, giving them everything he has, casting out demons, healing disease, restoring outcasts. After all that ministry, Jesus retreats for rest. But sleep is not enough. Jesus gets up, we're told, while it was still very dark, and goes to a deserted place to pray. Jesus needs more darkness. The Gospel, or Mark, of course, gives us the action with no commentary. Mark never has time for pretty details. Just Jesus needed darkness. We do know that Jesus was fully human, which means that, like us, from time to time, he experienced the full expanse of human emotions, like feeling exhausted, or depleted, or discouraged, or scattered and unsure, or full of grief, tending so many people, being pressed in upon by the crowds. And I wonder if Jesus moves toward the darkness because there he knows he can see and hear and watch more acutely for the living God. There is something in the darkness that Jesus needs. Is it clarity, comfort, assurance, energy, power? Whatever Jesus' need, God meets it there in the dark. When the disciples come to find Jesus, he's ready to go back out into the fray and do his work. If you're like me, seeking darkness is a tall order, with all of its instability and sorrow and danger. When, despite all of my best efforts, the lights have gone off in my own life, plunging me into the kind of darkness that turns my knees to water, my first response is never, "Yay!" When I see darkness coming or realize I'm already there, I'm more likely to run away or deny it. I associate darkness with times in my life when I lost someone or something very dear to me, or I sustained a terrible grief, or when I'm confused or terribly afraid, or when there's a significant transition or change, wanted or unwanted, when the tension is almost unbearable and I honestly don't know what to do or where to turn. Darkness is no fun. It can last a long time or a short time. It has been known to descend hard and fast, sometimes even without our awareness. But what our scriptures tell us is that when we find ourselves in the midst of it, it's good to remember that God does his best work in darkness. For it's there that we are poised when we're ready to best receive what God has to teach us, to show us, to move us, or to heal us. This darkness and cloud is always between you and God, wrote the anonymous 14th century author of The Cloud of Unknowing. And it prevents you from seeing God clearly by the light of understanding in your reason. So set yourself to rest in this darkness, writes the prophet, for as long as you can. For if you are to experience God or see God at all, it must always be in this cloud and in this darkness. Honestly, nobody wants to be there. But we do find ourselves there. And the good news is that God is there too. You may know yourself to be in darkness right now, or you may feel that we're in a bit of a darkness together here at St. David's in this moment of transition and change and unknowing and feeling our way. If you're one of the lucky ones who is for now standing in blazing light, it's true to say you'll be in darkness again. Sorry. For all of us, wherever we are spiritually, our Christian tradition offers some paths for those of us who want to learn how to walk in the dark. Lesson 1 of 2. Slow down. I'm not sure why we start moving faster and more frenetically when we find ourselves in a dark time. I think about the experience of touring an abandoned mine, you know, when they take you down into the earth on a freight elevator, down, 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 and then the tour guide, who always seems to be a kid, with your life in his hands, turns out the light to show how dark darkness can be, and you can't see your hand in front of your face. In those instances, our last impulse is to speed up, to run around in circles with our arms stretched out, groping for something sturdy. We stay put, we hunker down, we wait for the kid to turn the light back on. Learning to calm in the darkness is patient, unsettling work. It cannot be rushed. In the dark, we allow ourselves to bump into things that frighten us, knowing that we're more resilient if we're moving slowly. Darkness is the time to not take on one more thing. Darkness is the time to not cram in another project or responsibility. It is time to fill all time. It's not to fill it up with work and distractions. Darkness is time to be willing to disappoint a few people as we claim the space we need to move in it more intentionally. Finally, in darkness, curiosity is our best friend. Once the cloud has descended, once we do what we can to slow down a bit, it's time to take a look around. I call this the art of noticing. What do we notice around us? Because darkness heightens our senses, remember, sharpens our instincts, makes us more receptive. What can we see with the eyes of the heart? If you hear anything this morning, please hear this. As spiritual people, we need darkness as much as we need the light. To know the dark, go dark, writes the poet Wendell Berry. Go without sight and find that the dark too blooms and sings.